144th Contact, Thursday, the 26th of March 1981, 3:16 am. Semyaza says today, I want to finish what was denied to me during my last visit due to lack of time. I said that it is now the time when you should finally try to search for a further mission dissemination beyond your homeland. Billy says I remember it well, but you have said that traitors are now in my own ranks, who want to work against me and destroy our mission as well as our group members and me. Semyaza says sure, I spoke of that. Nevertheless, things have expanded in the meantime and have formed organizationally, whereby now also the authorities cooperate. Billy says I am not afraid of that, I told you this. Semyaza says of course, but the intrigues against you are already at the stage where official, defamatory machinations can bring you danger. And you know, nevertheless, that in this case nothing can be done against it. The Swiss authorities have already been a nasty thorn in your side for decades, which has become, in the course of the last 4 years, an entire thorn enclosure. Even the Swiss military forces have already been working for some time against you because on the one hand, you have lived for 4 years in dangerous proximity to one of their rocket bases, and on the other hand, because they have already for years become very insecure with regard to your contacts with us. For this reason, you are also constantly and sharply observed by them and monitored, and they don't even shrink back from monitoring your telephone calls and those of your group members. Of course, all of this will never be officially admitted, but this incontestable fact still remains. Some of the on-duty elements of the rocket base have been unofficially assigned to monitor you and have been instructed always to deny all of your statements and evidences by untruths if you step to the public with new information. So, for example, the instruction was issued that if you show new photographic material, then it should be maintained by the officers on duty of the rocket base that they observed how you faked these pictures with the model, etc. These statements were proven by the news service, Microfilm, in the year 1991. Billy says but this doesn't bother me. Semyaza says this should, however, because the time has come when you will come, through such lies, into harm. What has never been the case with all your personalities in your multimillennial mission now appears with you, namely that special organizations have formed with the assistance of the authorities and governments in order now, finally, to prevent the pervading and spreading of the truth by you and also to destroy you, all your group members, and the entire mission. Through the deliberate traitors who are often paid for their shameful activities, or through those who are easily influenced or those who have become sick in consciousness, virtually all ufological groups have become prejudiced against you and all our work, particularly in Europe but also in other countries under whom also all of the fallible group members fall. In particular, just the traitors since Jacob H. and his brother K bear the guilt for the fact that these slanderous intrigues were started against you and were brought into being, for which an evil fate will still redound to them. However, since this time, mission-destroying and slanderous machinations have appeared against Billy from various UFO organizations around the world, like, for example, MAFON, etc., proving the statements made here by Semyaza. Billy says but still today, I just don't understand why H has begun to work against me in this manner. With K, I know the reason, because he is absolutely enslaved by his brother and hopelessly influenced by him, so he is no longer able, in this connection, to think and act freely or logically. He is practically the consciousness slave of his brother, while Hans Jacob has, on the one hand, gotten into the devil's kitchen via sectarian conflicts and, on the other hand, because he couldn't cope with the fact that it was denied to him to take my place, which he wanted to gain by all means. Semyaza says these really are the facts of the truth. With H, the reason is a little more complicated. He has built his whole life on lies and deception, which he also demonstrated during his group membership. On the one hand, he worked in a scheming and mendacious manner for you and our mission, but on the other hand, he simultaneously worked treacherously for hostile-minded elements, who only worked with regard to destroying you and the truth. These treacherous actions toward you and the mission brought H into the severest conflicts of conscience when he suddenly realized with absolute certainty who you are in truth and that everything you offered corresponds to the absolute truth. These conflicts within him finally led him to the case because through his steady insistence of getting in touch with me, I allowed myself to be led to approach him in my ship so far that he came into my personal vibration field. Thus, he suddenly became aware of the true love and peace, which seemed like a paradise to him. But disaster immediately fell upon him when I went away again and he fell out of my vibration field. It seemed like the end of the world to him, which made him deal with suicidal intentions, from which I was able to prevent him only with great difficulty. For this reason, I tried to influence him to the better through my own vibrations, but this was clearly wrong because he only responded to any attempt to help him on my part by starting to pity himself more and more, and at last, a dangerous hatred built up inside of him against everything that has to do with rest, peace, and love, as well as with truth. He worked it out in such a way that it committed itself as a delusion inside of him, from which he is also no longer able to free himself by all external assistance. He fortifies his lies today with such hatred that he accepts them as truth and, therefore, can no longer make a distinction between lie and truth. He has become a fanatical believer of his own lies, from which he cannot escape any more, particularly because his material consciousness was damaged by everything, by what means he is no longer accountable. Today, he exhibits impairment of consciousness and psychopathic forms, which cannot be repaired any more by earthly means. Billy says you mean that he is, therefore, cuckoo? Semyaza says I understand your illusion. Yes, that is so. He isn't of sound mind in our interests any more than neither are those who give him faith because they have become subservient to him through his perfected lies and work for him against you, us, our entire mission, and against the group members. Billy says you actually mean that also these people have material consciousness damage and, thus, can no longer think clearly or understand clearly, which is why they also can't recognize the truth in our cause. Semyaza says sure, but the harm to the majority of these people could be repaired by themselves. So it is still curable. Their consciousness damage only rests in a single cell of their brain, in which consciousness-confusing acids have formed, which create a dependent bondage and which exclude the capacity to distinguish truth and falsehood. Neutral thinking without any prejudice would dissolve and eliminate these harmful acids in the aforesaid cell again. Nevertheless, if this doesn't happen, then everything will ultimately lead to the same end, to which H is hopelessly fallen. Billy says a hard thing. Semyaza says indeed, but in the end, they will bear all the guilt themselves, for it is easier for them to let themselves be cheated than to operate intellectually and logically, in order to own the truth for themselves through this. For the Earth people, thinking requires a lot more effort than just blindly giving themselves over to a faith that is built on lies and deceit. And all those who are subservient to the lies and deceit of Hans Jacob and the brothers H and K and all others, who want to destroy you, the group members, us, and the entire mission, they all are not capable of logical thinking because this work is uncomfortable for them and because not having to think spares them from any effort and also seems to them to relieve them of any responsibility. But they deceive themselves very much in this because with their wrong behavior, they place an unusually heavy burden, load, and responsibility on themselves, which will one day collapse on them and which they will have to bear with difficulty. That still hasn't reached all of their consciousnesses, but these effects that are very vicious and sometimes even dangerous for them are already at hand, it's just that they don't know this yet. Billy says there, I can probably also do nothing against it, in order to help these poor dogs. You know, somehow, I just think that I should, nevertheless, have an enlightening influence on them. Semyaza says that is neither your task, nor would it be effective, for it has already been determined by themselves in an unalterable form. Thus, pay no attention to them but give the necessary attention to yourself, your group members, us, and the mission, so that you finally take that path underfoot, which we've encouraged you to take for the sake of spreading the mission for a long time. In regards to this, I've brought you some data for your orientation, which you can have a look at, after which you should then go and clarify everything and prepare for the reception of the mission. And remember, you as well as all your group members, that the time now begins to hurry and that also the group members themselves are determined for this, even then, if they would separate from the core and deny everything. But on the other hand, we ourselves will not remain inactive and will try everything to avert impending evils from you and the group members, as we have been striving for some time on advising the High Council also to influence certain developments in earthly politics, in order to prevent, through these influences, the Third World War, which still glimmers threateningly in the earthly fate sky, or at least to be able to alleviate it. But whether we will manage all this, time will prove, because in certain matters, our hands are tied, so we must take very arduous paths, of which we cannot calculate with certainty whether they will be successful. This has arisen in such a way because dangers have suddenly appeared that could allow the earthly Third World War to expand into a global catastrophe. But despite everything, there are still good prospects that everything will still turn to the good. Billy says once again, this is news. Why that now? I mean the global catastrophe. Semyaza says for now, I still don't want to talk about that officially. It would be too dangerous, plus, everything is still in the open and, particularly, in the hands of America. Billy says then just unofficially. Is that possible? Semyaza says sure, but later. Billy says okay, girl. And in the morning, when the day breaks, I can finally take the first photos? Semyaza says that you can. I will be here. But now, I must go back, because in the meantime, I still have some tasks to do. Until we meet again. Billy says so then bye. At 5 am, I'll be waiting for you. The end. Traitors are now in my own ranks, who want to work against me and destroy our mission as well as our group members and me. Semyaza says sure, I spoke of that. Nevertheless, things have expanded in the meantime and have formed organizationally, whereby now also the authorities cooperate. Billy says I am not afraid of that, I told you this. Semyaza says of course, but I'm against you because on the one hand, you have lived for 4 years in dangerous proximity to one of their rocket bases, and on the other hand, because they have already for years become very insecure with regard to your contacts with us. For this reason, you are also constantly and sharply observed by them and monitored, and they don't even shrink back from monitoring your telephone calls and those of your group members. Of course, all of this will never be officially admitted, but this incontestable fact still remains. Some of the on-duty elements of the rocket base have been unofficially assigned to monitor you and have been instructed always to deny all of your statements and evidences by untruths if you step to the public with new information. So, for example, the instruction was issued that if you show new photographic material, then it's 144th contact, Thursday, the 26th of March 1981, 3:16 am. Semyaza says today, I want to finish what was denied to me during my last visit due to lack of time. I said that it is now the time when you should finally try to search for a further mission dissemination beyond your homeland. Billy says I remember it well, but you have said that the intrigues against you are already at the stage where official, defamatory machinations can bring you danger. And you know, nevertheless, that in this case nothing can be done against it. The Swiss authorities have already been a nasty thorn in your side for decades, which has become, in the course of the last 4 years, an entire thorn enclosure. Even the Swiss military forces have already been working for some time